Hi, and welcome to the 10 square meter workshop. I recently watched a video concerning a double roller guide for router and table saws. It was really nice and seemed to work very well. There was only one problem. At over £200, it's not really in my league. However, we make things, don't we? Let's get started. At the heart of it are these one-way needle bearings. Fitted on a 10mm shaft, such as this bolt, they will easily rotate one way but refuse to go the other way. To act as shafts, I'm using two of these 10mm bolts with the heads turned down. For the wheels, I 3D printed in TPU these 4 discs. They're 40mm in diameter and 12mm thick to match the bearings. The wheel assemblies will be carried on these 2 pieces of aluminium bar. First job is to clean these up and square them off. This is done in the usual way. The target width was 28mm. Next job is to drill and ream for the 10mm shaft. This is 10mm from the end. After the pilot hole comes the 9.9mm drill and then the reamer. They were both then drilled and tapped for a 4mm grub screw. I then mounted them back in the mill and took a 45-degree cut off the corners, more for aesthetic rather than any practical reason. A slot for the spring will be needed later, but for the moment they're done. I shall be making the main body of the device using a piece of scrap corian. Well, of course other material would do, probably even ply. After bolting it together, the mounting slots were milled and the overall size milled also. The centrepiece was then milled to just thicker than the sliding parts. The centrepiece was then put back in the mill to cut the slots for the roller guides. Here's the path for the first one. This material machines extremely well. First slot cut, and it's a sliding fit. Last step was to put a small recess at the bottom to take the spring. And with the second one cut, it's ready for assembly. Assembled, it looks like this, with the wheel carrier as a sliding fit. Time to fit the wheels. First, a 10mm slot was cut into the back of the wheel arm to house the spring. The axles were turned to length and the ends tapped 4mm. The bearings were pressed into the wheels with the aid of a little superglue. Assembly is in the order shown, and the result is wheels that turn one way but not the other. And here is the first one fitted. With the second roller block fitted, it's time to fit the retaining pins. I space out the rollers by 12mm using a convenient milling cutter and drill through. The holes made in the arms were tapped out 4mm. Matching slots were then milled out of the body. Cap-head bolts running in the slots retain the sliders against the action of the spring. Now I've got to look in my spring box, find a suitable size. This looks a perfect size, just need to cut it to length. That looks a good length to give the right level of tension. And that's the second one cut to length. I used my Bosch mini disc cutter to do this. Excellent little tool. Cleaned up and with the corners rounded, it looks like this. Time to make the clamps. My router table uses T-track, so it's just a matter of finding a couple of flats and some 6mm coach bolts and adding a couple of handles. And here it is, mounted on the router table. It's really supporting the workpiece in every which way. Wish I'd had it for my last project. So, let's give it a go. Genuinely, its first use. You know when you use a tool and it just feels right? Well, that about describes it. This gives me a lot of confidence in use. You really feel it's under control. I'm very glad I made it. So, what did it cost to make? Well, it was £14.40 for the 4 bearings, unidirectional, and the rest came from my scrap and spares box. Even if I bought the parts, it would have still been quite cheap. Well, that's all for this time. Why not subscribe for more?